Child Development, Smriti Irani has said that menstruation is not a handicap and it should not warrant a specific paid leave policy. Now, Irani was speaking in Rajya Sabha in response to a question on the menstrual hygiene policy in the country, where she clarified that there is no proposal under consideration to make provision for paid menstrual leave mandatory in all workplaces. Now, in a written response submitted in the upper house, Irani said, and I quote, "A small proportion of women and girls suffer from severe menstrual pain or cramps, and most of these complaints are manageable by medication." Did the government conduct research on how many people suffer from menstrual pain and to what degree? We don't know. In fact, a 2016 study published in the National Library of Medicine says that dysmenorrhea or severe period pain is very common, and in fact it is a leading cause of absence from work in reproductive age. So while menstruation is not a handicap, it can hamper a menstruating person's ability to perform daily tasks. But the question remains, should there be a period leave policy? We will be discussing that. Let's quickly listen in to what Smriti Irani had to say.
So as the gentleman would concede that as a menstruating woman, I can very particularly in this house say, menstruation and a menstrual cycle is not a handicap. Neither, it's a natural part of a woman's life journey. Given that women today are opting for more and more economic opportunities, I will just put my personal view on this, sir. I'm not the officiating ministry. We should not propose issues where women are in some way denied an equal opportunity just because somebody who does not menstruate has a particular viewpoint towards menstruation.
So will period leave deny women the opportunity to be equal participant in workforce, or is it counterproductive to what it is aiming to do? To talk about that is joining us Rituparna Chakraborty, who is the co-founder of TeamLease. Also with me, a very special panel right here in News 9. To begin with, my senior colleagues Neha, Khanna, Geeta, Dutta, Preeti, Agnihotri. Women, thank you very, very much. It's very rare that I say women. I often say gentlemen, which has become a case in point for most of our debates and discussion. But before I go to Rituparna, I would like to ask each of you to weigh in on what Smriti Irani said. She said it's not a handicap. I think we all know it's not a handicap. But will a period leave policy or a period leave provision help us or hamper us?
Shweta, I will be honest with you that as a woman, this is something I've always felt conflicted about, because we know that there are women out there who really do suffer during their menstrual cycle, and perhaps their productivity does get hampered. But at the same time, I will be honest, I think there is plenty of reason to agree with the minister. I think the reason why she's taken the strong stand that she has on this issue is because there is this concern in large sections that, if you're going to have this policy of paid leave for your periods, then it could end up in increasing workplace discrimination against women, because we've already seen, we're a country where you already have far fewer women in the workforce than should be the case. The numbers have fallen drastically, and you know this better as a business journalist. During the COVID period, we're anyway struggling to bring a lot of women back. They already face a lot of disadvantages vis-a-vis their male counterparts, right? Now, if you're going to add this policy, as some sort of a burden for companies, it is very likely that a lot of them will turn around and say that maybe we don't want to hire women in such huge numbers. And if that's the kind of situation we're going to have on our hands, then I think the minister does have a point. That instead of having mandatory paid leave for women during such a period, maybe we can find a middle path where women who suffer more than the others can perhaps get a little more leeway when it comes to applying for medical leave, rather than making it mandatory for companies.
So it is a very complex issue, Geeta, and you've been in the workforce for a while, and I think you can speak on behalf of a lot of women. You've mentored yourself. It is a complex issue for a young woman specifically to come up to her manager and say, look, I need a period leave. So that is in fact contrary to what a period leave would ask you to do, which is to declare that you're taking a leave because you're menstruating. What is your overall view on where we are at the moment? Have we reached a point where discussions are important, and a leave and a fixed leave for periods would initiate that discussion?
So I don't believe a fixed leave would initiate discussion. What you need to discuss in the workplace is be open and acceptable, since there are a lot of, at least in our field, even if you look in television industry, we have a sizable number of women who are working here. You need to sensitize places where the men are in the HR or the senior, generally workplaces, to let them know that there is a possibility that there are some women who might go through terrible pains, and therefore if they ask you for leave, don't laugh at them and don't discriminate against them. Understand that they need leave, but to specifically say, okay, I earmark leave. I agree with what Neha is saying. I don't think that is the, I've been a sports person all my life, and I've played, represented a state level, and I've played almost, chosen to play for national level, and I've never felt the need to, there were times, and we were wearing short skirts, right, in school and stuff like that, and then never ever, the correlation never happened for me. And even if you look at the advertisements in the, on news channel, television channel, new advertisements per se, when they have these sanitary napkin advertisements, they come up with the fact that don't, ladki ki udaan, and don't stop her and stuff like that. And it sort of is the truth. We are coming from a very kind of a society where they would have women stay separately. Her utensils were, she was separated from the house and all of that. Now you're getting her back, and now you're saying, no, let's separate her. If she's, having her periods, or she's down, for a few days of the month, then no, let's treat her differently. No.
My biggest concern, sorry to jump in there, is that could it become a disincentive for companies to hire women?
Right.
And we certainly don't want a situation like that, where at a time when we're, hoping that more and more women can actually join the workforce.
Absolutely. And Preeti, it's often compared with maternal leaves, that if women are allowed per policy, as per law of the land, to avail maternal leave, they should also find it within the law to get a paid leave whenever they are, suffering from great period pain. Yeah. Does that account for a lot? And it does, in fact, as per a study that I quoted back in 2016, various other studies as well, it does account for a lot of women's majority of their life cycle where they are in pain, they're not able to attend to their basic duties. Girls who are not able to go to school. In fact, 20% of an average girl's time in school is lost because she's unable to bear the pain, therefore unable to attend the school. At a time like that, it's now, do you think it's time that we address the monster in the room?
Yeah, in my opinion, while I agree with you, Geeta, that, saying that it shouldn't be a mandate, but, looking at the situation when there are girls who are in tremendous pain and they just cannot get up from the bed. There are days that they are bleeding so heavily that they cannot put their 100% at work. So when you're coming at work and you cannot give your 100%, then obviously there's no point. It's better you take rest. And to my opinion, companies, especially corporates, can think of giving an optional leave for the girls who want to take a leave. The ones who are in pain can opt for a leave, and the ones who are comfortable can opt out.
Absolutely. And let's also get in Rituparna, who's been waiting and listening in to all of us. Ritu, thank you very much for taking time out. I want to begin by understanding, all of our concerns, I think, if you'd like to sum it up, is that we do need leaves. Yes, of course, we do need provisions where girls find it, better, and there's an incentive to go to work and you don't have to take a break and you're not disincentivized. At the same time, it will create more sexism at workplace. Perhaps the stigma will be more if women are given leave. In your assessment, is that the right sort of debate that one should be having right now?
Honestly, when we are talking about women and their challenges at workplace, there are really bigger issues to debate around. That's, of course, my conclusion. By no means I am going to undermine the plight of the women who suffer from such issues, especially during menstruation. So just to point out, when Smriti Irani actually makes a statement that it's not a handicap, it's a 100% honest fact, and it's true. It's not really a handicap for any woman. Is it a sickness? It's not a sickness. Having said that, I think what essentially we should be more focused around, and the fact that we are even talking about it as an issue, as something that we hesitate to discuss, or will an employer give me leave if this is my real reason? All of this can be dealt with if we are making our workplace a lot more diverse and inclusive. The fact that it's something that we don't feel like talking about, honestly, is a bigger issue. Honestly, all women do not have this. Some women can work through their menstrual cycle, some women cannot because of the cramps, because of the pains. Now, it is very subjective and it's very individual specific. I think rather than it being a mandate where you're culling out leaves that this is going to be paid leave for this reason, I think organizations are, and the progressive ones, are trying to sensitize the entire ecosystem at workplaces to kind of be a lot more sensitive because this is a real problem. For example, you see that who are the companies in India who started it? Like, okay, I see Swiggy, of course, was probably the first one who made it like a big announcement. And then we saw a few more startups. But you know, if I were to talk about the larger organizations, the way they're looking at it is that let's come out with a leave policy which doesn't discriminate anyone, either sexes at workplaces. It's a consolidated one. Now, who chooses to use it for which purpose is something that should be left to the discretion of the individuals at the workplaces. For example, probably minimum leaves that organizations are looking at is probably 18, 19. It's state specific, so differs from state to state. And some organization may add another 7 or 10 days extra leave. Now, how you unpack it, whether you want to pick out your casual leaves, whether you want to pick it out of your sick leave, whether you want to use your special leaves, I think this is something I believe most organizations are choosing to leave it to the discretion of the individual and the employee, and that's the right thing to do because that essentially will ensure that there is the right amount of sensitivity and there is no possible discrimination that can happen. As a matter of fact, the fact that there are only 7 countries, I mean, it's not that globally organizations or countries are not sensitive about it, but the fact that there is no correlation between this and there being an upside in terms of making women more inclusive at work, or there being a huge dramatic improvement in the country's GDP. So I guess the only way we can be inclusive is get more women at workplace and much of these issues will get resolved automatically.
All right. No, I mean, it's a debate and let's open up the debate. I beg to differ on some of these points that were taken up by my colleagues and Rituparna as well. To begin with, I think to start a conversation, it is important to introduce a period leave policy, and which is when you'll be able to go up to your manager and actually have a conversation to that respect. Now, I think the problem is two-pronged. One is the economic problem, that women will not have enough economic opportunity, and the other is the social stigma. And you've got to look at it from both these perspectives. Let me bring in an interesting point that Rituparna mentioned. She said 7 countries have affected these change. And I have some numbers here to put this in perspective. Very interestingly, when Japan introduced leave policy, it was way before World War II, and after they introduced it, as of 1965, 26% women were availing period leave policy. As of 2017, it had come down to 0.9%. So as far as the economic disadvantage is concerned, women, even if they have that policy leave available to them, are not really taking up that leave. Now, a similar thing was seen in South Korea, where the numbers dropped drastically from the time it was introduced up until now. So that economic argument, and perhaps, you know, Neha, you could come in at that, the economic argument that women are going to take more leaves, it's going to disadvantage them in the workforce. I think your numbers speak for themselves, and the numbers here state very clearly that that may not be true.
You know, my concern there, Shweta, is about the mindset problem that we have. Like I said already, I think we're a country where we should be having far many more women in the workforce than we do, and the COVID pandemic made the situation far worse. And what happens, you know, in a lot of cases is, you know, prospective employers will not say it out loud. But if they see it as an economic burden for themselves, having to mandatorily grant a certain amount of period leave to all the women in a certain age group working in that environment, they may just end up having this unwritten rule that maybe we do not want to hire that many women.
Bias.
Right? So these are things that are often not spoken of.
Right.
But unfortunately, these are the realities that women end up confronting. So my take on this is that it should not be very difficult to find a middle ground here. Of course, Rituparna is right in pointing out not many countries have this policy in place. Spain, in fact, recently became the first European country to have such a policy. But, you know, I think the answer lies, as she rightly pointed out, in sensitization, creating more awareness and destigmatize this issue. If you're going to have an environment where she talks about inclusivity, and that's important, the more women you have, I think the easier it will be for other women to operate and work freely in that environment. You can walk up to your manager that much more easily and say, maybe I'm suffering more than the others and I need this. So I think it's important you destigmatize it, that it's not you don't become a butt of jokes because you've walked up to your manager and said that I have bad period pain and I can't come to work, or that it does not result in sexism or, as you said, silent biases. Once you have addressed that issue, which like I said pertains more to the mindset than anything else, I think the problem is largely resolved.
And Hannah, how do we really confront this mindset problem?
Okay, so I have 2-3 things. First of all, I agree with her when she said, you know, you have set of leaves that you've got, and also remember, I mean, all of us here, how many of us actually face, you know, get pain every month, and how many don't, and how many get it once in, you know, 3 months or something like that. So depending on, if you make it mandatory, saying, okay, you know, you've got this period leave, I may not want to avail it, and I may miss out something else. My point is that if you have sick leave or you have casual leave, those who really need it should be, you know, able to avail. That's why you have a casual leave, because it normally lasts for a day or two, or sometimes all 4 days that you're down, right? But so that is one aspect of it. Secondly, there are medications available, as the minister said. Thirdly, I've seen this experiment that they did, you know, because the idea is to sensitize, to have it conversate. There are a lot of guys, men who are very shy of asking and talking about this, and women themselves therefore hesitate to walk up and, you know, they might cook up all sorts of reasons to do it. One of the foreign channels, they had a device where they attached it to the men, and they said, okay, button 1, and this guy said, okay, I'm feeling little something. Button 2, he says, okay, I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable. So they went up to button 5, and he says, this is what is the amount of pain that women go through every time they're down, and the men couldn't handle it. Now, my point is that there are different ways of sensitizing people, you know, on what women go through to understand. So there could be some who may not, who just breeze through it, and there's some who genuinely face crippling, you know, pain and they can't get up. And you need to have those conversations. We didn't have POSH. We started POSH. Now every time a new person joins in an organization, the women and the men, they're told there's a, you know, there's a committee that's formed. Similarly, have one like this, start the conversations. The idea is not to separate. Already on the social media, I'm seeing men talking about, you know, it's not that the men are not going through certain things. We also have, which is the fact. And you can't be fighting for equality and then saying, I'm sorry, we're equal, but when I'm sick, my sickness is more than what somebody else. Tomorrow you'll say mental health is a main issue.
Not a biological responsibility as well. When some of these arguments were also used against maternity leave, you know, come to think.
No, but maternity leave, maternity leave, I beg to differ over there, because maternity leave, you have a baby, and the baby is dependent on the mother. So first 6 months, first 6 months, there is a logical reason for the mother to be with the child, because you're breastfeeding, you're looking after the child, your physical health. You know, there's a whole lot of saying that in Indian families, when a baby is born, the mother is given a lot of nutrition.
And there I'd say go a step further and give men more paternity leave, because they better handle some of the responsibilities.
Yeah, they better take up. I agree.
Absolutely.
And I keep asking that, did you take the maternity leave too? Because, you know, they need to be. So that is complete. I mean, there is no comparison.
Yeah, I would like to make a point. Like, you know, women are biologically like this. That's why we get maternity leaves. So even a period leave should be considered as a part of the biological reason of a woman body, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, and Rituparna, to understand, you know, at your level, since you've been a co-founder of a company and you manage talent and you continue to do so till now, what are the steps that HR and companies are taking? We've seen a list of these companies on our screens, from Zomato to Swiggy, which have now introduced a period leave policy. In fact, when Zomato started it, and Dipinder Singh, the CEO, said something, and I would like to quote what he said, because that attracted a lot of negative attention. He said, there shouldn't be any shame or stigma attached to applying for a period leave. You should feel free to tell people on internal groups, on emails, that you are in fact on a period leave for the day. So to start a conversation and be honest about why you're taking that leave, as opposed to a general, I am not feeling well, I am sick and this is a sick leave. So be honest, start a conversation, which is what Dipinder Goyal said, and that did not go down very well with a lot of people on social media. What can the companies do? How much have they done so far? In your assessment, you know, the introduction of period leave policies in about 20 to 18 to 20 companies that you can see on your screen, is that enough?
Okay, I think, again, like I mentioned, this is something which is very individualistic. I mean, a woman may want to talk about it, another woman may not want to talk about it. A man might want to tell the whole world that he's suffering from piles and can't show up at work. Another man may not want to. So honestly,
but are they even comparable?
No,
is it even comparable? A generic health condition, which is,
no, the reason I mentioned is that it's equal suffering. By the way, I mean not equal maybe, but it's a suffering. I mean, who am I to judge someone else's pain? But what I'm trying to tell you is that, yes, organizations are much more sensitive about the challenges that women go through at workplace. I'm not saying it's just specifically one issue. There is growing awareness about the issues and challenges that women face. Are we perfect as a country? No, but I do see visibly organization now trying to make an effort to be a much more inclusive workplace and organization which attracts diversity. Having said that, I mean, I would actually, recently somebody asked me how many of the big listed companies have this as a list, as a lead policy. How many of the financial services company has it? How many of the tech companies have it? To be honest, as far as my knowledge goes, which could be challenged at any point, and actually none of them have it. But in spite of that, financial services companies, large tech companies have extremely good record in terms of being inclusive, diverse employers, which means that in spite of what we believe, that these women do feel valued at their workplaces, and they feel heard, and they feel it's safe to work in such places. So my issue is that this particular aspect is something which is important for an individual, and I'm not denying that it's not important. But it should be left to the individual whether they want to talk about it. And I do agree with Geeta that one woman might choose to avail of it, while another woman actually might want to utilize that leave to kind of go and watch his or her son play in the sports day or something. So my point is, please give flexibility. When you tighten the noose to this extent, I don't know whether it yields the very objective which was set up, which inspires people to do such creative policies. So I think that's my limited point. And even on maternity benefit, I'm just going to briefly touch upon it because I've studied this intensely since the new amendments has come. It's absolutely logical that, and it's United Nations guideline that breastfeeding is important for a child for the first 6 months. However, India is the only country where the burden of 6 months maternity benefit is on the woman's employer. India is the only country. And that essentially did have effect on women and getting women being hired at workplaces, women who are approaching marriageable age, or women who have been married. There has been bias against such women being hired at workplaces in many organizations. So we cannot deny that policies which are not thought through adequately and actually does not include women in the policy making sometimes have very adverse and absolutely opposite results from what it was intended to do.
All right. Now, this panel has so far disagreed on whether...
I have to just add one thing. Just one, sorry.
Sure,
one thing.
Geeta, yes.
You know, I remember I was very keen to join the Indian Air Force, wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I remember fighting for it. That was years before they allowed it. And my family is completely from the forces. And I remember talking to this uncle of mine, and he said, you know, one of the reasons why we're not taking, we are hesitating is also because apart from the fact that, you know, if the plane falls and the way our enemies are, the way they treat women, there's also the fact that if you become a fighter pilot, 9 months you're pregnant and 6 months you have a baby. So imagine you're not flying for that many months, and amount of loss to the exchequer if a Air Force fighter pilot does not fly the sorties and trains every day. So he says...
It's their loss, come to think of it. I mean, you know, as someone who's a firm believer of our biological duty and responsibility, it is not something that I choose to do, it's something that I'm expected to do. Whether, I mean, all of us, I mean, some of us have children, some of us don't have children, but the expectation is to have kids and the expectation is on us. So, I mean, essentially, you've got to come up with some way or the other to make sure that we are a part of the workforce.
So, that is why give them exactly what she said. Give them leave, let them pick and choose. Don't tighten it so much. That's my point.
Absolutely. All right. So this panel agrees. at least on the fact that there is a social stigma. That social stigma needs to be catered to, countered at both the level of employers as well as at a social level. Now, we're living in a country where about 70 to 80% mothers, this is according to a 2014 study, still believe that menstruation is dirty, which is essentially what they're teaching their kids. And the kids then go on to school and they become a part of the workforce, and the stigma continues. You can't break the chain. What do we really need to do? What should employers do? Because all of us are working women, and perhaps this bulletin broadcast will be watched by a lot of working women. What can the working women do to ascertain themselves and their need for a leave when they're menstruating, Neha?
You know, Shweta, again, it brings us back to the point that we were making earlier. You've got to have a conversation around this. And the conversation should not be confined to just studios like ours and newsrooms. It should be happening across...
At home.
At home. It should be happening across offices. Like I said, this is not, this should not be a butt of jokes, as it might be for a lot of people, especially men. This should not be something that is spoken of in hushed tones. I think that also needs to change.
Absolutely.
And if you can just normalize this conversation, that, you know, it is the female anatomy that you're talking about, no big deal. So the idea really is to create that kind of sensitization, but coming back to the fear of discrimination that I have voiced, I think Rituparna, in a sense, just endorsed what I said, or shall I say confirmed my fear as an HR leader, that whether we like it or not, this is the reality that a lot of women do end up missing out on opportunities to get hired because of this one factor. And we don't want that to happen. We want more women in the workforce, and therefore I think it all comes down to greater sensitization, more awareness, and flexibility.
Flexibility
Just
and
keep it
conversation.
flexible.
Yeah,
You know,
like, you know, even the HR need to now, you know, bring in some seminars, internal seminars. So
Conferences,
yeah,
seminars,
conferences on this topic, and they can also do
Town
something
halls.
better than just a vending machine in the washroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
More than a vending machine. A town hall perhaps is
town
very
hall
much
for sure.
needed.
And definitely we need, you know, we are having these conversations. I'd love to see how many people are talking about it in our news studios also. We don't even we don't talk anything other than politics and sports maybe. But you know, you need to bring in what society is going through, what the country is going through, what all of us need to discuss. We need to bring this more and do this more often.
Perhaps time to have a poll in the TV9 newsroom on the matter.
And I'd love to know what the men think, by the way. This is an all-women panel, which is great, because we've had enough of manners, but I'd love to know what the men think.
What the men think, and if they're okay and they're comfortable, they need to be comfortable with this conversation.
I was coming to that. I would love to have them sit here and see if they actually are open and they talk open.
To even having the
Discussion is with the men.
Absolutely.
So next time let's have
more
male
men.
panelists.
Let's have male panelists next time. Neha, Geeta, Preeti, Rituparna, thank you very much, all of you. Absolute pleasure listening to you. I hope our audience, our listeners have taken much from what is to come as far as HR policies with respect to paid or unpaid menstrual leave is concerned. I think there is a consensus that there needs to be a greater recognition of what women go through, but at the same time to designate perhaps a certain leave as a period leave would be to restrict a woman's choice and her ability to take that leave. But with that, we've come to the end of this show. Thank you very much for watching. Up next is a Newsline Plus documentary on the Maratha community's agitation to be included in the OBC category and how this agitation could change the political discourse in Maharashtra.
Those who are economically backwards from any community should be given, you can say, that kind of a, you can say, reservation. Not everybody.
This all is bluff.